Peter Gago, Chief Winemaker, and Steve Leonard, Senior Red Winemaker here at Penfolds. St Henri Shiraz, 2007 vintage. Now, I understand St Henri has quite a heritage behind it. Can you give us a little bit of insight into that?
Well, from a Penfolds perspective, it goes right back to the early 1950s, but prior to Penfolds purchasing the Aldana winery, not far from here, where we are at McGill, St Henri's were actually commenced production, 1890s.
Wow.
So you can get older bottles from the early 1900s, but from a Penfold perspective, no, 1950s onwards.
Yes.
And the great thing about that heritage and tradition, the style has never changed.
Right, and you've been involved in making this wine for a long time as well, Steve.
Yeah, that's right, and Peter's correct. It's a style which really is only, Grange is really only the older Penfolds red.
So, I mean, this is again a blend of the best of the best. What sort of regions and vineyards has the fruit come from for the 07 vintage?
Yeah, interestingly, the 2007 St Henri is primarily sourced from Penfolds Robe Vineyard in the southeast, but also fruit from the Barossa, McLaren Vale, Adelaide Hills, interestingly enough.
That is interesting. Yeah.
Fruit sourced from premium vineyards not far from the Penfolds winery here at McGill.
Which is something we're actually wanting to encourage. In the old days, Paracombe and areas now that we very rarely hear of, we're trying to resurrect. So lots of foothills vineyards that went in over half a century ago are reappearing in this style.
So how does that characteristic set St Henri from, say, some of the other Australian reds?
Well, we make this, here we are in a cellar with old vats behind us, and that style is quite provocatively and deliberately still a very old-fashioned style of Shiraz.
What does that actually mean?
Well, it's unencumbered by new oak. There is not one skerrick of new oak or small oak, for that matter, that goes anywhere near this style. It's all matured in very large oak vats of minimum age 50 plus years.
Wow.
So the wine is a good example of pure, unadulterated Shiraz fruits. And in this instance, Steve, there's something quite significant about the 07 vintage with regard to that.
What is that, Steve?
Yeah, 2007 is 100% Shiraz, which is a little bit unique because most St Henri vintages do have a proportion of Cabernet.
Right. And so does that make this the star, do you think, of the 07 year?
I think it's a really good example of a style sourced, mentioned before, from Robe.
Yes.
So with the 07, we went down to Robe, where the fruit, a little bit cooler area, and for St Henri, we're looking for really nice aromatic fruit. So that area in the 07 really suited the style very well.
Indeed. And you know, because it's coming out with our 2011 releases, we only just recently wrote all the tasting notes.
Right.
So the 2007 was included in that mix of the great 2008s, and it held its own.
So what would you say are some of the other characteristics about how this wine tastes then?
Well, I think the major feature of St Henri in any year, it's not so much even about flavour, it's about the mouthfeel, the texture, the way the wine hits the mouth, the maturation characters later on. But everything about the wine is very different. Again, because no new oak is part of what occurs there. Yeah. So it's very much St Henri, it's very much of the 07 vintage, but it's a wine that many people will be tempted to drink perhaps a little bit too early. A lot of people don't hold on to their St Henris, which oftentimes is a mistake.
So how long should we be cellaring this for? In your opinion here?
Yeah, I'd certainly put that down for 10 to 15 years. But it's got beautiful fruit characters now. So it just depends on the consumers when they like to drink their reds.
Well, you talked about, Peter, how it hits the mouth and the texture and so on. It's hard to describe that in words. I suppose what you have to do is actually drink some.
Yes, experiment.
Fantastic. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Pleasure.